The auction hall was enormous, filled with lights, loud noises, and the chatter of alien species from every corner of the galaxy. Ships of all sizes had arrived, carrying wealthy buyers, collectors, and curious spectators who had traveled across star systems to see the rarest and most exotic beings offered for sale. Rows of cages and enclosures lined the walls, each holding creatures with vibrant scales, strange limbs, glowing eyes, or mysterious abilities. Merchants shouted loudly, describing their creatures with pride and exaggeration, hoping to get the highest bids possible. The air was thick with tension, excitement, and a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. Some aliens whispered about the creatures' abilities. Others openly compared them, discussing how strong, fast, or intelligent each one was. Yet among all the creatures, one stood out immediately, not because of color or strength but because of attitude, intelligence, and sheer untamable spirit. Lyra, the young alien girl, sat in the corner of a high cage that had been designed to hold the most difficult beings. She was small, lean, with sharp, alert eyes that scanned everything around her. Her limbs were agile and wiry, built for speed and quick reflexes, but she did not act without reason. She had a reputation whispered across star systems as the untamable. No one had been able to control her. No one had been able to break her will. She had resisted capture before, and she had been sold at auctions in other sectors, but every time she had left her captors frustrated, angry, and slightly terrified of her abilities and determination. Even in this hall, surrounded by alien species much larger, stronger, and seemingly more powerful than she, Lyra's gaze was unflinching. She did not flinch at the loud announcements, the moving crowds, or the flashing lights. She remained still, observing, calculating, and silently judging the intentions of every person who came near. Merchants had tried to sell her. They had called out her features, abilities, and supposed strengths. They had promised buyers power, obedience, and a companion who could adapt to almost anything. The crowd, however, was hesitant. They had heard the stories. They knew the legends. And even as she sat quietly, her presence alone spoke louder than words. Lyra's body language, the way she held herself, the steady focus in her eyes, told everyone that this was not a being to be commanded or dominated lightly. Some aliens laughed nervously. Others whispered, "She is dangerous. You cannot control her." Still, the merchants persisted, waving their hands, promising rewards, insisting that someone would pay handsomely for such a rare specimen. The auction began. Loud voices shouted numbers, wings of alien traders signaled bids, and the energy in the hall rose to a fever pitch. One by one the creatures were claimed. Large, colorful beasts went to wealthy buyers. Shiny, intelligent creatures were whisked away. Some of the most exotic aliens left their cages willingly, intrigued by the attention or the promise of a new home. Yet Lyra did not move. She did not react. She did not signal obedience or fear. She remained in her corner, her sharp eyes scanning the room, following movements with precision, evaluating the intentions of those around her. Every hand that reached toward her, every whisper of offer, was met with a quiet defiance. She was watching, waiting, and deciding. She was untamed in thought and body, and she knew it. As the auction continued, one by one the other creatures were claimed. The cages emptied, leaving gaps along the walls where exotic beings had once been. Shouts and cheers accompanied each sale. Traders counted their profits. Buyers checked their new acquisitions. But the last cage, the one holding Lyra, remained. The auctioneer's voice became more strained. "Last chance bidders. Here is your final opportunity. Do not miss this rare being." Yet the response was hesitation, followed by murmurs of doubt. The stories of her defiance, her ability to resist control, and the failed attempts of past owners discouraged even the wealthiest bidders. They had come seeking rare treasures, but few wanted a challenge they could not conquer. Some looked at the cage with apprehension, some with fear, and most with uncertainty. Lyra's reputation had grown faster than any advertisement, and now it worked in her favor. She was untamed, unpredictable, and undeniably dangerous to those who relied only on power. Hours passed. The excitement in the hall began to fade. The auctioneer's voice grew more desperate, but the bidders were gone or uninterested. Those who remained whispered among themselves, debating whether Lyra could truly be tamed, or whether the rumors had exaggerated her abilities. Some speculated she would resist any form of control immediately, possibly attacking those who approached her. Others imagined what it might mean to own such a rare being, the potential prestige of having the untamable as a companion or servant. Yet in the end no one stepped forward. Wealthy traders, clever strategists, and daring collectors, All hesitated, unwilling to risk failure or humiliation. The cage, once surrounded by eager eyes and hands, now sat in near silence. Lyra's sharp gaze seemed to grow brighter, almost knowing that the crowd had abandoned her. She relaxed slightly, confident that her instincts were correct. She was indeed untamable, and this was her moment to remain free. Alina, the chief merchant overseeing the auction, paced behind the stage. Her patience was wearing thin. She had seen auctions fail before, but the idea of leaving such a rare alien behind was unthinkable. She gestured sharply to her assistants, whispering instructions about lowering prices, extending offers, and trying new strategies to attract bidders. Yet no one responded. The crowd had grown quiet, their excitement drained. Some left the hall entirely, leaving behind the echo of empty cages and fading footsteps. Alina's eyes narrowed. She had built her reputation on selling the rarest beings in the galaxy. She was used to control, precision, and efficiency. This situation was new, unwelcome, and troubling. Lyra had outlasted the entire auction with a calm and focused mind, doing nothing at all except remain herself. The hall settled into a strange, almost awkward silence. Lyra sat in her cage, calm and observant, watching the emptying space. Her body relaxed for the first time that day, though her senses remained alert. She knew she was alone now, not threatened by others, not in danger, but truly alone in a way that few creatures could withstand. Her mind calculated possibilities. She could resist further attempts to sell her, she could defend herself if necessary, or she could wait for someone truly different, someone worthy of her trust. She did not fear the situation, she embraced it. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the end of the auction and the absence of anyone brave enough to face her. As Alina and the assistants discussed options, some minor traders shrugged and began packing up. The hall lights dimmed slightly as the final announcements echoed through the large space. It was clear, no one would claim Lyra today. No one would attempt to challenge her defiance openly. She was the last being left, untamed and unbeaten, the focus of whispers and wide eyes. Her sharp ears caught fragments of conversation. She is impossible. No one can control her. We should leave before she becomes dangerous. The words confirmed what she already knew. Her reputation was intact. Her independence remained intact. She had survived an entire auction without bending to anyone's will. The silence and emptiness of the hall created a new atmosphere. Other bidders had left, dealers were gathering their records, and assistants cleaned up the scattered notes and documents. Lyra's sharp gaze remained on the movement of humans and aliens around her, noting who was confident, who was cautious, and who showed weakness. She did not move toward them, did not signal aggression, but her presence alone kept a respectful distance. Lyra's aura, calm and controlled, commanded attention even without action. She was untamable not because she attacked, but because she did not need to prove her strength through force. Her strength was her independence, intelligence, and refusal to bend to fear or power. Finally, after hours of waiting, Alina sighed heavily. She approached the cage, inspecting Lyra closely. "It seems, she really is untamable," Alina said quietly to herself. Lyra's sharp eyes met hers briefly, unafraid, assessing the human standing before her. She made no move to attack, nor did she show submission. She simply observed. Alina turned away, shaking her head slightly. "Leave her," she ordered her assistants. "The auction is over. Pack up. She is your problem now." The assistants nodded, some with relief, some with unease. The room began to empty further, leaving Lyra behind, sitting quietly in the now quiet hall, fully aware of her victory in patience and defiance. Lyra remained in her cage, alone yet not lonely. Her instincts told her that this was only the beginning. She had survived the auction, proven her untamable nature, and now waited for something, or someone, different. She could feel that the next challenge would not come from wealth, force, or status, but perhaps from someone who understood patience, intelligence, and care. For now she remained still, her sharp gaze following every movement, confident and calm. The auction hall, once filled with noise and chaos, was now hers to observe, and she ruled it silently through the simple truth: she could not be tamed, controlled, or underestimated. Even as the last assistants left and the lights dimmed, Lyra stayed vigilant. Her body relaxed slightly, but her mind remained sharp, watching the exits, calculating, waiting. The alien girl had survived the test of the auction, proving herself untamable in every sense. Today the hall belonged to her, not in a loud display of power, but in quiet presence, intelligence, and the unwavering confidence that she was truly untamable. The galaxy might see her as a challenge, but she knew her strength lay in patience, observation, and defiance. She was alone, yes, but more alive, aware, and ready than ever before. Lyra's story, her legend as the untamable alien girl, was just beginning. The auction hall had grown quiet after all the other creatures had been claimed, leaving only Lyra, the untamable alien girl, sitting in her cage. Her sharp eyes followed every movement, calculating, observing, alert. She had survived the chaos, proving her independence, and now she waited, not with fear but with confidence. The bright lights above reflected in her keen eyes, showing her alertness and intelligence. She did not flinch at the remaining humans who wandered around the hall, busy packing notes or preparing to leave. Nothing fazed her. She had endured louder voices, stranger creatures, and bolder buyers before, and she knew she could endure what remained. From the far side of the hall, a human approached. He was quiet, unassuming, and unlike most of the alien buyers who had stepped forward earlier. His name was Ethan, and he carried no flashy clothing, no advanced gadgets, no displays of wealth or power. He walked slowly, deliberately, his eyes soft, calm, and focused on Lyra. The other aliens barely noticed him at first. Some snickered. A human? Alone? He cannot even carry her cage, much less control her, whispered a traitor to his companion. Others shook their heads, muttering that humans were weak, unworthy, and unprepared for anything serious. Yet Ethan continued, unfazed by their attention, their mockery, or the immense odds stacked against him. Ethan stopped a few feet away from Lyra's cage. He did not shout. He did not make threats. He did not raise his hands or demand obedience. Instead, he simply looked at her, letting his presence be calm, unhurried, and non-threatening. His gaze was steady but gentle. It did not seek to dominate or intimidate. For the first time that day, Lyra noticed something different. This human did not carry fear or greed. He did not seem interested in controlling her or showing off his wealth. He merely observed her, waiting patiently, almost as if he understood something about her spirit without knowing her history or her reputation. The air in the hall seemed to shift slightly. The auctioneer paused, unsure if this quiet human meant anything. Alina, the chief merchant, frowned and whispered to her assistants. Who is he? Does he want her? He cannot possibly be serious. The assistants shrugged. Some shook their heads, wondering why anyone would dare approach the untamable girl alone, without preparation or protection. But Ethan did not flinch at the whispers. He stayed where he was, his posture relaxed but attentive. His hands rested at his sides, empty, showing that he carried no threat. His calmness created a strange contrast to the tension in the hall, drawing Lyra's attention in a way none of the shouting bidders or wealthy aliens had managed. Lyra tilted her head slightly, studying Ethan. She had faced stronger beings before, some towering over her with massive limbs and sharp claws. Some had tried to frighten her into obedience with weapons or strange machines. Others had used subtle tricks, promises, and bribes. None had succeeded. Yet this human was different. He had no obvious strength, no intimidating aura, no displays of control. His presence was quiet, measured, and deliberate. It intrigued her, but it did not intimidate her. She remained seated, her limbs coiled, ready to react if necessary, but her sharp eyes followed him closely, curious about this unusual approach. Ethan crouched slightly, lowering himself to her level without moving too quickly or making sudden gestures. His voice was soft and even. "Hello, Lyra," he said simply. "I'm Ethan. I want to meet you." There was no command in his words. No hint of dominance. Just an introduction. Lyra's ears twitched, picking up the subtle tone in his voice. Most beings in the hall had tried to impress or frighten her. Most had shouted or gestured aggressively. Ethan's calm, patient words were new to her. She did not trust him yet, but she was intrigued. For the first time, she felt that perhaps this human was different from all the others she had encountered. Other bidders and spectators leaned closer, whispering among themselves. Some mocked him quietly. He cannot possibly handle her. She will bite or escape within seconds. Others watched curiously, sensing something unusual in the interaction. Alina frowned again. She had never seen a human attempt such a risky move alone. Most humans, even brave ones, would have avoided her cage, relying on machines, cages, or other allies to manage the untamable girl. But Ethan seemed unafraid, patient, and confident in a way that required no demonstration of strength. Ethan slowly extended his hand, open and empty, showing no weapon or control device. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. "I only want to understand you." Lyra's body tensed. Her tail flicked slightly, her muscles coiled, and her claws flexed, ready to react if needed. She had never trusted anyone so quickly. Some beings required weeks, months, or even years to accept care or companionship. But Ethan did not rush. He waited, letting her process his presence and intentions without pressure. This was unfamiliar to her, yet something in his calm patience told her that he was not like the others. Minutes passed. The hall remained quiet, the other bidders leaving or observing silently. Ethan did not flinch, shift, or show impatience. His gaze stayed on Lyra, his posture relaxed but attentive. Slowly she began to relax slightly, her tail lowering, her claws resting. She did not trust him yet, but she recognized that he was different. He did not seek to control her. He did not threaten her. Instead, he waited and observed, allowing her to make the next move. Lyra's mind worked quickly, evaluating him, calculating risks, and deciding that this human might be worthy of cautious interaction. Ethan spoke again, his voice gentle. "I won't rush you. You can decide what you want. I will wait." His patience was real. He did not make promises or threats. He simply allowed her to see that he would remain calm, no matter what she did. Lyra's sharp eyes studied him carefully. No tricks. No devices. No hidden intentions. Just a human, patient and willing to wait. The simplicity of his approach, his quiet confidence, and the lack of fear or greed captured her attention. Other bidders whispered among themselves. Aliens who had been watching for years had never seen this approach work. Humans were considered weak, fragile, and incapable of handling difficult creatures. Yet here was Ethan showing a kind of strength that required no weapons, no machines, no intimidation. The strength was patience, calmness, and understanding. It was subtle, almost invisible to those who relied on brute force or status, yet it was effective in ways no one could predict. Lyra's instincts told her that this human was unlike any she had encountered before. Slowly, Lyra shifted her weight in the cage, her sharp eyes never leaving Ethan. She sniffed the air lightly, sensing his intentions, his calm energy, and his patience. She had faced creatures larger and stronger than him, some even capable of breaking bones or controlling minds. Yet none had used the quiet strength of waiting, observing, and respecting her boundaries. Lyra's curiosity grew. She did not approach him yet, nor did she allow herself to be touched. But she recognized that he might be worth considering. This was a first. No human had ever maintained her attention without fear or aggression. Ethan waited, silent, steady, and patient. He let Lyra set the pace. He did not speak again immediately, only observing her reactions, small shifts in posture, and the subtle movements of her tail and limbs. Lyra studied him in return. Minutes felt like hours, but the hall's emptiness and quiet amplified the small interaction between them. Other aliens began to notice, murmuring quietly among themselves. "He might actually succeed," one whispered. "I have never seen her tolerate anyone like this," said another. Even Alina, standing nearby, began to watch with curiosity rather than irritation. Finally, Lyra tilted her head slightly and sniffed closer toward Ethan's hand. It was not trust, not yet, but a recognition. This human was different. He did not rush her. He did not try to command or force her. He simply waited, allowing her to make the next decision. Ethan remained still, letting her take the lead. Slowly she inched closer, just enough to acknowledge his presence. The other aliens gasped quietly. It was the first sign of interaction, however tentative, between the untamable girl and a human. Ethan smiled softly, encouraging but not demanding. "That's good," he said. "Take your time. You can choose." Lyra's sharp eyes studied him, calculating, observing, and measuring. She had survived countless auctions, resisted multiple bidders, and evaded every attempt at control. Yet something about this human was different. He did not fight. He did not compete. He did not threaten. He simply showed patience, respect, and understanding, qualities she had rarely encountered. By the end of the hour, Lyra had inched a few steps closer to the front of her cage, still maintaining distance, still untamable, yet showing a spark of curiosity. Ethan did not move. He allowed her to observe him, to make the next choice. The other bidders and aliens whispered, stunned at what they were witnessing. Humans, long underestimated, had shown a kind of strength that the galaxy rarely acknowledged. Quiet, steady, patient, and full of understanding. Lyra remained untamable, but for the first time in her life, she recognized a being that might meet her on equal terms. A human who did not seek to dominate her, a human who could be trusted enough to observe and wait. Ethan remained patient, his gentle gaze fixed on her, ready to continue the interaction as she chose. The auction hall had emptied of competitors, and for now, It was just the two of them, locked in a silent understanding. A beginning quiet and unassuming yet full of potential. Lyra was still untamable, yet for the first time she considered that a human might be different. And Ethan, standing quietly, had stepped forward into a moment that could change everything. After the auction ended, Ethan stayed near Lyra's cage, refusing to leave even as the hall emptied. Most humans would have turned away, intimidated by her reputation and the stories of her defiance. But Ethan was not most humans. He had come here with quiet determination, patience, and the belief that strength was not only in force but in understanding. He crouched near the edge of the cage, keeping his movements slow, steady, and non-threatening. Lyra's sharp eyes followed him, unblinking and wary, but she did not retreat. For the first time since the auction began, someone had approached her differently. Someone had not tried to dominate or control her. Ethan understood this and he intended to honor it. He spoke softly, letting his words float in the air without demand or expectation. "I am not here to hurt you," he said. "I am not here to control you. I just want to understand you." His voice carried a calmness that was unfamiliar in the auction hall. Lyra's ears twitched at the sound. She had heard many voices, loud, commanding, threatening, or teasing, but none had sounded like this. None had carried patience, respect, and curiosity all at once. She did not move immediately, but she did not attack either. Her sharp mind began to assess him, to calculate his intentions. This human was different. He did not seem foolish, weak, or threatening. He seemed patient. Over the next hours, Ethan remained near her cage. He did not shout or wave, nor did he try to tempt her with food or gifts. He simply stayed, observing her reactions and responding gently when she made small movements. Sometimes he mimicked her gestures subtly, allowing her to see a reflection of herself without forcing her to act. Other times, he whispered small, calm words, describing what he was doing or noting something he observed in the hall. His approach was simple. No commands, no threats, no tricks. Just patience, observation, and quiet respect. Lyra's tail flicked slightly as she watched him. She remained cautious, her muscles coiled and ready to react if necessary. But curiosity began to grow within her. She had faced countless beings stronger than herself, yet none had exhibited this kind of restraint. She noticed that Ethan did not flinch when she glared at him, did not try to force her attention, and did not attempt to corner her. He waited for her to make the next move. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet powerful. Slowly, Lyra allowed herself to observe him more closely, noting the steadiness of his hands, the calm in his eyes, and the patience in his movements. Other bidders had long since left, and the auction hall had emptied further. Lyra realized she was alone with this human. She did not know what to make of it yet. She had resisted every other attempt to approach her, yet here was someone who seemed to wait for her choice rather than impose his own. Ethan noticed her careful glances and offered a small, gentle smile, one that carried no threat, no expectation, only reassurance. Lyra studied him in silence, assessing the meaning of the gesture. Slowly, she began to relax her posture, lowering her claws slightly and allowing her tail to rest more comfortably. Ethan continued to speak softly. "You can take your time," he said. "I will wait. You don't have to do anything you don't want to." His words were simple, but they carried a promise. He would not force her. He would not push her limits or demand obedience. He would be patient. Lyra tilted her head slightly, curious but cautious. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. Most beings had tried to dominate her immediately, relying on power, technology, or fear. Ethan relied on none of that. He relied only on patience and understanding, qualities that intrigued her deeply. Over the next day, Ethan remained near her cage, speaking gently, observing carefully, and mimicking her subtle gestures to show that he respected her autonomy. Lyra began to experiment cautiously. She moved a few steps closer to the front of the cage, testing him without committing fully. She sniffed the air around him, flicked her tail, and twitched her ears in small, deliberate movements. Ethan responded by remaining still, maintaining a calm presence and allowing her to control the pace. He never moved forward unless she did, never raised his voice, never threatened. This approach, simple yet profound, slowly built a bridge of trust between them. By the second day, Lyra began to respond more openly. She would tilt her head, follow his hand with her eyes, and occasionally mimic his gestures. She did not allow him to touch her yet, but she began to show small signs of interest and curiosity. Ethan noticed each subtle movement, acknowledging it with soft praise or a nod, reinforcing her sense of control and autonomy. Each interaction was brief but meaningful, a step in the careful process of trust building that Ethan understood better than most. Lyra tested him frequently. Sometimes she made sudden movements, flicking her tail or lunging slightly, only to see how he would react. Each time he remained calm, steady, and patient. He did not pull back in fear, did not shout, and did not attempt to restrain her. His presence was consistent and reliable, a stark contrast to the chaos and aggression she had experienced in previous auctions. Slowly, her suspicion began to soften, replaced by curiosity. Perhaps, she thought, this human could be different. Perhaps he could be trusted. Over the next several hours, Lyra began to inch closer to Ethan. She sniffed the air around him, observed his subtle gestures, and allowed him to mirror her small movements. Ethan spoke softly, narrating his observations and offering gentle reassurance. "I see you," he said quietly. "I understand you are cautious. That is good. You can take your time." His words were simple, but they carried meaning. Lyra realized that he acknowledged her autonomy, her choices, and her independence. For the first time, she felt that someone respected her untamable nature rather than trying to suppress it. Other aliens in the hall occasionally glanced over, watching the interaction with disbelief. A human, small and weak in appearance, had captured the attention of the untamable alien girl without force, threat, or display of power. They whispered among themselves, questioning what they saw. Humans were not supposed to succeed in these situations. They were considered fragile, weak, and incapable of managing difficult creatures. Yet Ethan's patience and consistency were working. Lyra's gaze remained fixed on him, curious and cautious, yet steadily drawing closer. By the evening, Lyra allowed Ethan to approach slightly, still cautious but no longer fully defensive. She tested the distance, leaned her head forward, and observed his reactions. Ethan remained calm, steady, and gentle. He acknowledged her movements without forcing interaction, showing her that she could choose the next step. This subtle exchange continued, building trust through patience rather than power, understanding rather than control. Lyra began to feel that this human's intentions were different, that he respected her independence, and that he could be trusted more than anyone she had met. Ethan spoke again, softly and deliberately. "You can do whatever you want. I will not push you. You decide." His words, repeated over hours of quiet interaction, had an effect. Lyra tilted her head and slowly moved closer, allowing him to mirror her position without touching her. It was a small step but significant. She was beginning to trust him, not blindly but cautiously and intentionally. This trust was earned through patience, consistency, and respect, qualities she recognized as rare and valuable. Over the next several days, Ethan and Lyra developed a rhythm. He would speak softly, observe carefully, and mirror her movements without imposing his own will. Lyra began to respond more openly, occasionally moving toward him or following subtle gestures. She remained cautious, never fully surrendering control, but her curiosity and tentative trust grew steadily. Each day, Ethan reinforced the understanding that she could set the pace, make the choices, and maintain her independence. The trust was mutual. He trusted her to act according to her instincts, and she began to trust him to respect her decisions. By the end of the week, Lyra allowed Ethan to approach the cage more closely. She did not flee or attack. She flicked her tail, twitched her ears, and watched him carefully, testing his reactions. Ethan remained calm, patient, and respectful, showing her that he would not force her or impose his will. Slowly, Lyra leaned forward, allowing him to extend his hand gently without recoiling. It was not full trust, not yet, but it was a start. She had begun to recognize that this human was different, that his patience and understanding were genuine, and that she could cautiously explore this new connection. The other bidders, long gone, could not comprehend what they were witnessing. Humans, small and underestimated, had shown a kind of strength that the galaxy rarely acknowledged. It was not in physical power, wealth, or technology, but in patience, observation, and consistent respect for autonomy. Lyra, the untamable, had begun to respond to this quiet strength. She remained cautious, but curiosity and trust were slowly replacing her defiance. The bridge between human and alien had begun to form, step by careful step, through empathy, patience, and gentle understanding. By the end of the interaction, Lyra had allowed Ethan to come within a few steps, to mirror her movements, and to speak softly without causing fear. It was a significant breakthrough. She had begun to trust him, cautiously but intentionally. The human had achieved what no one else could. He had begun to build a connection based not on force, wealth, or intimidation, but on patience, respect, and consistent understanding. Lyra remained untamable in spirit, but for the first time she considered that someone might meet her on equal terms. Ethan's quiet determination had shown her a new kind of strength, one that did not rely on power or fear. It was the strength of patience, observation, and respect. Over hours, days, and careful interactions, he had built the foundation of trust that would allow their relationship to grow. Lyra, once wary, cautious, and fully untamable, had begun to respond, curious but still careful. This small, deliberate progress marked the first true step toward a connection that could change everything, for Lyra, for Ethan, and for the galaxy watching silently from afar. Trust had begun. Patience had succeeded. And Lyra, the untamable alien girl, had chosen to consider this human as someone different, someone worthy of attention and cautious exploration. The auction hall had long since emptied, leaving only Lyra and Ethan in the quiet space that once roared with activity. Lyra had spent days observing him, testing him, and gradually allowing him to approach without fear. She had remained cautious, alert, and untamable in every sense, yet something about Ethan's patience and calm presence had begun to work on her. She had never encountered a being like him. Not powerful, not threatening, not wealthy or loud, simply patient, steady, and kind. And now, after days of careful interaction, something remarkable happened. She made the choice to allow him closer, to test trust beyond observation. It began slowly. Ethan extended his hand again, soft and careful, showing no threat, no force, no device meant to dominate her. "You can do this," he whispered gently. "Only if you want. I will not rush you." Lyra's sharp eyes studied him, noting the consistency of his patience over days. She remembered every time he had waited, every moment he had mirrored her movements without forcing her, every word spoken softly without command or expectation. She considered the risks. She could flee, attack, or ignore him entirely. But she also sensed something new, the possibility of cooperation without fear, a chance to explore interaction without domination. For the first time, Lyra leaned forward cautiously, letting Ethan's hand brush hers. She did not flee. She did not resist. She did not show aggression. It was a small gesture, a simple test, but it marked the beginning of a major breakthrough. Ethan smiled softly, careful not to make sudden movements, and whispered encouragement. "That's good. You're safe. You choose the next step." Lyra's tail flicked nervously, her muscles tensed but not in hostility. She had begun to consider the human's presence differently, not as a threat, but as a potential companion she could interact with on her own terms. The moment was subtle, almost invisible to anyone who might have been observing, yet profound in its impact. Lyra had resisted everyone else who had approached her with force, intimidation, or bribes. Many of the wealthiest buyers had failed, leaving her caged in frustration or fear. But this human, small and seemingly weak, had succeeded in ways that brute strength could never achieve. He had earned her cautious trust through patience, gentle guidance, and consistent respect for her autonomy. Lyra's sharp mind recognized this difference, and she allowed herself to experiment with cooperation. Ethan slowly lifted her hand with his, careful not to apply pressure or control. Lyra followed his movement with her eyes, allowing herself to be guided by his steady presence. Her steps were slow and deliberate. She tested the space around her, exploring cautiously as he moved beside her, never forcing her forward. Each movement was a choice she made consciously, a deliberate act of trust. For the first time in her life, she moved not out of fear or obligation, but out of curiosity and cautious cooperation. Aliens who lingered at the edges of the hall, some traders, some spectators, some assistants, watched in awe. They had seen untamable creatures resist every attempt at control, yet here was Lyra, once defiant and fierce, now following the guidance of a human. She was not submitting out of fear. She was choosing trust. Every step she took beside Ethan was a conscious act of cooperation. The whispers among the observers were filled with disbelief. "How can a human achieve this?" one whispered. "She is untamable," another said. "No one else has even come close." Yet Ethan's quiet determination, patience, and respect had earned what power could not. Lyra explored the hall slowly, each step calculated and cautious. She tested the distance between herself and Ethan, sometimes moving forward, sometimes pausing to assess his reactions. He remained calm, gentle, and supportive, never forcing her and always giving her the choice to stop or continue. His hand remained near hers, ready to guide but never to control. Each movement reinforced the idea that trust, not fear, could create cooperation. Lyra's sharp eyes watched him, noting the consistency of his behavior and the safety of the interaction. She began to sense that she could rely on him, at least partially, and that she might be able to explore more without losing her independence. The humans' patience created a new dynamic between them. Lyra had spent her life avoiding control, resisting any attempt to dominate her, and relying solely on her instincts for survival. But Ethan's approach was different. He waited. He mirrored her actions. He offered guidance without pressure. Over hours of careful interaction, this approach had built a foundation of trust that no force, machine, or promise could replicate. Lyra was still cautious, but she began to explore the world around her alongside him, testing boundaries, and learning that cooperation could exist without submission. Small gestures marked the progress. Lyra would lift her hand slightly, allowing Ethan to mirror it. She would step forward tentatively, feeling the ground beneath her and sensing that she was not in danger. She would pause to study him, ensuring that his actions remained consistent with his previous behavior. Each movement was deliberate, a choice she made to test her trust in him. And each time Ethan responded with calm reassurance, allowing her to maintain control of the pace and space between them. The slow, steady process built confidence in Lyra, showing her that trust could be safer than defiance. Observers were stunned. Aliens who had sold countless creatures, faced the most aggressive and defiant beings in the galaxy, had never witnessed this kind of interaction succeed. A small human, physically weak by most standards, had achieved what no one else could. He had earned the cautious trust of the untamable. His strength lay not in wealth, size, or weapons but in patience, observation, and understanding. The lesson was subtle yet profound. True strength could exist in quiet persistence and respect rather than dominance or fear. As Lyra moved further from her cage, she began to respond to Ethan's gentle guidance more consistently. She followed his hand, explored the hall carefully, and occasionally glanced at him, observing his reactions. She still maintained distance and caution, but the shift from total defiance to tentative trust was remarkable. Ethan allowed her to make every decision. He would pause when she paused, step lightly when she stepped lightly, and never impose his will. This approach reinforced her sense of autonomy, teaching her that trust could exist without giving up her independence. Over the next few hours, Lyra explored more confidently. She moved around small obstacles, tested the floor, and gradually increased the distance she allowed between herself and the cage. Ethan remained beside her, calm and supportive, guiding her only through gentle cues rather than force. The progress was gradual but undeniable. She was beginning to understand that cooperation did not mean submission, and that trust could be earned through patience rather than intimidation. Her sharp eyes and alert instincts had learned to recognize safety in Ethan's presence. Aliens continued to watch in awe. Traders whispered among themselves, noting that they had underestimated both the human and the alien. They had assumed the untamable girl would resist any attempt at interaction. Yet here she was, exploring freely under his guidance. Her steps were deliberate, cautious, but voluntary. She was still untamable in spirit, but she had begun to test the possibility of trust. This moment demonstrated a lesson that many observers would carry far beyond the auction hall. Humans could succeed where power and force failed, through patience, care, and steady guidance. Ethan spoke softly as they moved, narrating observations and offering gentle reassurance. "Good. That's it. You're safe. You can choose each step." His voice was steady, consistent, and gentle, reinforcing the idea that she controlled the pace. Lyra paused occasionally, observing him, testing his consistency, and evaluating the safety of her choices. Each pause, each step, and each gesture built a subtle bond between them. She was learning that trust could be safe, that cooperation could exist without fear, and that a human could be different from every other being she had encountered. By the end of the day, Lyra allowed Ethan to hold her hand fully for the first time. It was a small act, but monumental in significance. She followed his guidance as he led her around the hall slowly, exploring safely, and making decisions about movement and space. The once untamable girl had begun to choose cooperation over defiance, trust over fear. Her cautious curiosity had replaced some of her suspicion, and she was beginning to experience the possibilities of working alongside someone who respected her autonomy. The aliens who remained as observers whispered quietly, filled with astonishment. This human, small and underestimated, had achieved a breakthrough that others had deemed impossible. Lyra had chosen to respond to patience, not force. She had begun to cooperate with someone she could have easily ignored or resisted. Her steps, careful and deliberate, demonstrated a remarkable truth. Strength could be quiet, gentle, and patient. Power was not always in size, speed, or wealth. It could exist in understanding and respect. By the end of the interaction, Lyra had walked a significant distance under Ethan's guidance, still cautious but increasingly confident. She had tested him repeatedly, and he had responded consistently with patience and care. Trust had been built gradually, step by step, gesture by gesture, word by word. For the first time, Lyra had allowed a human to influence her movement voluntarily, not through fear, not through coercion, but through respect, patience, and gentle guidance. Her tail flicked lightly, her ears twitched occasionally, and her eyes shone with curiosity and alertness. She was still untamable in spirit, independent and strong-willed, yet she had begun to explore a new form of cooperation. Ethan's presence, quiet and consistent, had earned a small but meaningful trust. And for the first time, the untamable alien girl began to understand that trust could be chosen freely and could exist without the loss of autonomy. The breakthrough was subtle but profound. Aliens in the hall, long familiar with the untamable, watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Humans, often underestimated, had demonstrated a new kind of strength. Lyra, untamable by nature, had responded to patience, respect, and consistency. Her steps under Ethan's guidance were proof that cooperation could exist without force, that trust could be earned through gentle persistence, and that sometimes the smallest and quietest beings could achieve what brute power could not. After the remarkable breakthrough with Lyra, news began to spread across the galaxy. Word traveled quickly from the auction hall, first through whispers among the traders who had witnessed the events firsthand, and then through messages carried by ships, networks, and interstellar communications. Aliens who had long assumed that humans were weak, fragile, and incapable of managing difficult or untamable beings began to reconsider their assumptions. The story of Ethan and Lyra became a legend in its own right, a tale of patience, understanding, and the quiet power of empathy. It was said that the untamable alien girl, feared and avoided by the wealthiest and strongest species, had chosen to trust a human of her own volition, without fear or force. Ethan and Lyra had developed a deep bond during their time together. The alien girl remained cautious, aware, and fiercely independent, yet she had allowed herself to be guided, observed, and cared for in ways she had never experienced before. She explored the galaxy with him at her own pace, testing each new environment, responding to gentle guidance, and learning to navigate spaces she would once have avoided. Her trust was hard-won, built slowly through consistent patience, understanding, and respect for her autonomy. Ethan never forced her, never demanded obedience, and never treated her as property or a tool. Instead, he treated her as an intelligent, sentient being capable of making her own choices. The ripple effect of their story was enormous. Species that had once relied on fear, power, and intimidation to achieve compliance began to see the value in patience and empathy. Aliens who had underestimated humans started to pay closer attention to their unique approach to relationships, problem-solving, and interaction. Whereas many species valued brute strength, dominance, or wealth, humans demonstrated a power that was subtle but transformative, the ability to build trust through care, respect, and consistency. Lyra's choice to cooperate voluntarily, guided by understanding rather than fear, became a symbol of this lesson across star systems. Ethan carefully nurtured the bond with Lyra, understanding that trust required constant reinforcement. Every action, no matter how small, mattered. When they explored new environments, he allowed her to take the lead, assessing obstacles, testing spaces, and choosing how to respond. He mirrored her movements gently, speaking softly when necessary, and always allowed her to make decisions. This ongoing respect reinforced her sense of agency and strengthened the trust between them. Lyra learned that cooperation did not mean loss of control and that someone could guide her without attempting to dominate her will. The humans observing their interactions were equally impressed. Many young humans and explorers saw the example set by Ethan and Lyra and began to understand the unique qualities that allowed humans to succeed where others had failed. Patience, empathy, and respect for autonomy were not weaknesses but strengths that could overcome fear, force, and intimidation. Lyra's story became a teaching moment, inspiring humans to embrace these qualities in their own lives and interactions. It also gave them confidence that they could build connections with other species in ways that brute power could not achieve. Lyra, for her part, thrived in this new life. She learned to explore environments safely, using Ethan's guidance as a tool rather than a command. Her mind, sharp and agile, absorbed new information, strategies, and experiences. She tested her limits, observed her surroundings, and made choices independently, but always with the reassurance that she had a partner who respected her decisions. Her untamable spirit remained intact. She had not been tamed, coerced, or forced. She had chosen trust voluntarily, and in doing so, she had discovered a new way of interacting with another being that allowed her freedom and security simultaneously. The alien community, hearing and seeing reports of their interactions, began to shift perspectives. Many leaders and traders who had previously relied on force now considered the value of patience, negotiation, and trust. The story of Ethan and Lyra became a case study in galactic diplomacy, interspecies relations, and conflict resolution. Aliens realized that humans were capable of feats beyond physical strength. They could earn respect and cooperation from beings previously considered untamable through careful observation, patience, and understanding. The galaxy slowly began to acknowledge that strength could exist in gentleness, that power could be expressed through empathy, and that influence could be gained without coercion. In time, Lyra became an ambassador of sorts, not formally but through her actions. She demonstrated to other beings that cooperation could exist without fear and that trust could be more powerful than domination. Ethan continued to support her, respecting her independence while offering guidance and protection when needed. Together, they traveled from system to system, quietly teaching others the lesson that had been learned in that auction hall, that the smallest and seemingly weakest beings could achieve remarkable outcomes when they relied on patience, understanding, and respect. Throughout this journey, Ethan remained consistent. He never imposed himself on Lyra, never acted out of impatience, and never allowed external pressures to influence their interactions. His example showed that leadership and influence did not require force or intimidation, but consistency, reliability, and genuine care. Lyra responded accordingly, demonstrating that trust could be built slowly and deliberately, without shortcuts or coercion. The bond between them became stronger with each day, a living example of the philosophy that humans could teach to the galaxy. Trust and care could achieve what power could not. Galactic scholars, researchers, and storytellers began to study the phenomenon. Reports described the interactions between Ethan and Lyra in detail, analyzing how the humans' approach had successfully gained cooperation from a being previously considered untamable. Philosophers debated the implications. If humans could earn trust through patience, empathy, and respect, what other relationships might be redefined? Traders reconsidered negotiation strategies. Diplomats observed new methods for conflict resolution. Even military strategists noted that influence without force could sometimes succeed where overwhelming strength failed. The lesson was clear. Patience and care were formidable forms of power. As their journey continued, Lyra's confidence grew. She navigated new environments with curiosity, observing details, testing boundaries, and occasionally leading Ethan through areas of interest. Her independence remained intact, and she made every choice deliberately. Ethan's calm presence allowed her to take risks she would not have considered before, knowing that she could explore safely without losing control. This delicate balance between freedom and guidance reinforced the lesson that trust, once earned, was stronger than any command enforced by fear. Stories of their success spread across planets and star systems. Alien parents used the tale to teach their children about patience and cooperation. Educators cited the interaction as an example of emotional intelligence. Explorers and scientists considered the implications for cross-species collaboration. Humans gained respect in circles where they had once been dismissed, not for their technology, not for their wealth, but for their ability to build meaningful voluntary trust with beings who had resisted every other approach. The galaxy began to see humans in a new light, small, unassuming, but capable of extraordinary influence through patience and care. Lyra herself became a symbol. She represented the idea that independence and cooperation could coexist. She was untamable in spirit, yet willing to engage with another being under terms of her choosing. Her choices showed that trust could be more powerful than fear, that cooperation could be voluntary and meaningful, and that even the most defiant or independent beings could respond to patience and respect. Her presence alongside Ethan reminded the galaxy that power was not the only measure of success. Influence could come quietly, persistently, and respectfully. Ethan and Lyra's journey continued, quietly shaping perceptions across systems. Other humans learned from Ethan's example, understanding that strength was not always visible. They saw that trust, patience, and care could change the outcomes of interactions that others considered impossible. Lyra's choice to cooperate was a living demonstration of these principles. Together they traveled, explored, and interacted with beings who had once been wary, fearful, or dismissive of humans, showing that a calm, patient, and respectful approach could achieve extraordinary results. Even in formal contexts, where traders, diplomats, and leaders gathered, the story of Lyra and Ethan was cited. Humans were no longer seen as weak. They were recognized for a unique strength, the ability to earn trust and cooperation where power, wealth, or intimidation failed. Scholars discussed it, leaders debated it, and species across the galaxy began experimenting with patience, empathy, and voluntary trust in their dealings. The galaxy learned a profound lesson. Small beings could teach great truths, and gentle persistence could surpass force and effectiveness. As time went on, Lyra and Ethan's bond remained strong. Lyra explored, observed, and learned, yet she never lost her independence. Ethan guided without imposing, protected without controlling, and respected without demanding. Their partnership became legendary, an example of how humans could influence beings far more powerful or fearsome than themselves through care, patience, and understanding. Across the galaxy, the story inspired countless beings to reconsider what strength truly meant. The lesson was simple yet profound. Trust could be earned through patience. Cooperation could arise without fear. Care could succeed where power failed. Lyra had chosen to stay with Ethan, safe, respected, and free. The untamable alien girl had responded to quiet strength, and the galaxy could not ignore it. Humans, often underestimated, had shown a form of power that was subtle, enduring, and transformative. The story of Ethan and Lyra became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even the smallest, gentlest actions could change hearts, minds, and entire civilizations. Through their journey, the galaxy learned that sometimes the most effective leaders were not the loudest, the strongest, or the wealthiest, but those who understood patience, empathy, and respect. Lyra's untamable spirit, combined with Ethan's gentle guidance, demonstrated that true power could exist quietly in trust and in care. The human had succeeded where others had failed, not by force, not by intimidation, but by understanding and consistent kindness. The lesson spread like a quiet revolution. Patience and care could reshape expectations, bridge divides, and create bonds stronger than fear or power. Lyra stayed by Ethan's side, exploring, learning, and interacting with the galaxy on her own terms. She remained untamable, independent, and intelligent, yet she had discovered the value of trust. Ethan's patience and understanding had shown her that cooperation was possible without submission, and that care could be a powerful force. Together, they continued to influence those around them, quietly teaching that the true measure of strength was not in domination, but in the ability to build meaningful trust, to inspire cooperation, and to respect autonomy. And so, the untamable alien girl and the patient human became a symbol across the stars. The galaxy had learned something new about humans. Trust, patience, and care had won where power had failed. Lyra remained safe, respected, and free. And through this remarkable story, beings of all species began to see the quiet, enduring strength of humans in a new light. The galaxy had changed, one careful, patient interaction at a time.